Hello, Yvette. Welcome to IP Voices, the international interview series highlighting the creative minds behind brands and innovation. And I'm really so excited to have you join me today. And today we're going to New York, New Jersey, where you are based. And I'm so excited to have a chance to have this conversation with you. We've met many, many moons ago when we were both in New York. So I'm really happy that you're here and that you're going to share a little bit about, more about your story with everyone else. So let me introduce you first, and then you can add a few more things afterwards. But so Yvette, you are currently Director of Legal Affairs for LoveShackFancy, which is a fashion and apparel brand where you lead all legal matters across IP, marketing, and commercial operations. As the company first legal hire, which, definitely we want to hear about. You've built the legal function from the ground up, establishing scalable processes and partnering closely with the executive leadership to support the rapid growth of your company, right? While safeguarding the brand and growing the brand. You are originally from Venezuela, so I definitely want to hear more about that too in a second, where you have earned your law degree before you continued your legal education and work in the United States. You hold an LLM from Golden Gate University School of Law. You've also completed a few additional legal studies at UC Berkeley to strengthen your expertise in the US legal framework and also global practices. And before joining Love Shack Fancy, you were senior IP counsel for IP and marketing at J.Crew, another fashion and apparel brand, where you brought in basically the IP portfolio in-house. And before J.Crew, I think this is where we met. You were at Victoria's Secret. You worked on Victoria's Secret and Harry Bendel brands, where you managed global trademark and copyright strategies. And earlier in your career, maybe you'll tell us a bit more too, is you also practice you worked in big international law firms like Baker McKenzie, DLA Piper, and KNL and Gates. So I'm really, really excited to have you here. And please, maybe we start with how you entered the IP field, but before you go there, tell us a little bit more about those brands that you've supported and, a little bit more if you want to add anything about what you've done and your background that I've just quickly highlighted here, please do.
Thank you for having me. I think what these brands have in common is that they are consumer facing brands where creativity is the product. So that's what the Victoria's Secret brand, Henry Bendel, J. Crew, Madewell, they all those brands and Love Chat Fancy, they are heavily based on creativity. And this business they focus on design, storytelling, and the brand identity brought together by the design and the storytelling are the core asset for this brand. So it plays, I think, IP regardless of the support in commercial operations and other enforcement or compliance roles. I think the IP is where it plays a core role for all these brands.
And what brought you in IP? Because I mean, you started your legal career, I guess, in Venezuela. Why don't you tell us more about that, where you started and how you entered IP?
Well, then, and that's a so I actually wanted to be an artist, and all my initial studies were in art, but then life took me into law, and a few years into my career in Venezuela, I discovered IP, particularly copyright, and once I discovered that, I decided that I wanted to be in that field. That's when I started working on Baker McKenzie and Venezuela. And I really changed everything for me. It allowed me to kind of reconnect with the creative side that I always liked, but it taught me the legal lens to protect art, design, and the creative expression. So in a nutshell, that's what I got into.
Very cool. And what brought you to the US?
My husband,
It's always that. Yes, always a love story. There's nothing better than a love
actually,
story, right?
I initially came to
Yeah.
study English because I didn't speak English.
Yes.
To open opportunities in Venezuela, professional opportunities, I wanted to learn English and then go back to Venezuela. But while I was doing that, I met my husband.
And the rest is history, right? I would like to ask you now, what have you found the most rewarding since you started working for Victoria's Secret or even, even there, Baker McKenzie in Venezuela? What do you find most rewarding about operating at the intersection of creativity, business and law?
I think the most rewarding is being able to bridge creativity and business, right? So it's not just about protecting the idea itself, but it's helping to shape them in a way that allows the business to move forward safely. So I think that's the rewarding part, that they come up with this idea, they bring it to you, and at first you might be in shock. Oh no, you can't do that. Just working closely with them and translated the legal risk into a practical solution. I think that's the most rewarding part. And especially when you see the end product, when you see it in a commercial, or when you see that the product is doing so well, that's the rewarding part for me.
Yes, very cool. And so now you're a generalist, really. You're no
Mhm.
longer just I shouldn't say even that, but you're no longer in an IP department in a bigger function. You are the legal function for a very dynamic brand, and you do more than IP today. And I'd love to hear about this transition. How did this come about? And how did IP in the prior roles you held in the big companies and big firms prepare you for this role?
LoveShackFancy recruit me, and when I walk into this role, they actually explained to me that they needed someone who can work with them in different capacities. And I wanted to gain more experience, particularly in the commercial operation side, because before that, I was just concentrating in IP. And then I was moving slowly into marketing, right? So I think that the transition has been challenging in a way, but I
Mm-hmm.
think the experience that you gain as an IP attorney help you build the foundation of managing risk, value, reputation, and different parts of the business, and how the business connect through IP, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
everything IP, you realize that in a company with the brand is the asset, it touch
Mm-hmm.
everything.
Yes.
So I think the IP background, it help you to prioritize,
Mm-hmm.
because IP moves so quickly that I think it help you to prioritize where's the need, and also it help you to translate those legal concept into easy to understand concept, so
Mm-hmm.
your business partner can take the appropriate decision.
Yes.
I think also what it helped me was the background that I have with law firms, that you
Mm-hmm.
learn without actually realizing that you get to be trained in how to administer your time. It's more like a time, since you are trained to like build certain hours a day,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and also to prioritize your
Yeah.
workload. I think that transition from IP, and IP is very different to a litigator. You have to be very organized in order to meet your deadline. So I think that way that IP is approached not only in house but also in a law firm, it help you. It help you to transition into a role that requires more of you, more of making decisions.
Interesting. Yeah. So it helped you with prioritization.
Yes.
It helped you with, I would say, you said legal risk, communicating to the business in a practical way, the legal risk, and also time management and project management. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Thank you. That's great. That's super helpful because, not a lot of people in IP have made the transition. And often, I think often people maybe might be a bit, I don't know, a bit
Afraid.
scared, yeah, afraid to make that transition. But I do think that IP professionals, because exactly what you said about being at the center of the brand, and the brand is the core asset of a company, especially if you're in fashion and apparel. But I think in many, many sectors. So it's interesting to hear from you that that experience translates quite well. So now we're going to move on to the a bit like understand your creative catalyst. What's, you know, around creativity. It's not at all related to the law. I'd like to know, because you said you love art, so
Mhm.
maybe that would be your influence. But what is the non-legal influence, yes, that inspires you, inspires who you are, and inspires how you work, that keeps you spirit up every day? Do you have one
Yes,
to
I
share with
do.
us?
So I have two influence, one stronger than the other. I really like the work of Joan Miro and Picasso. especially during the Spanish Civil War. And the way that inspired me is like during that time, during the Spanish Civil War, artists like Miro and Picasso, they transformed, sadness, conflict, and instability into really powerful forms of expression that still resonate to these days. I think the challenge that they had, I bring it to my life, like, in the sense that, of course, it's not by any scale, it's the same, but I just feel the connection between being challenged and trying to create something powerful that, will inspire others. So I do it with my interns. I run the interns and LoveShackFancy, and I had a program similar in J. Crew. So I
Yeah.
try to inspire them by connecting creativity and IP. J. Crew was IP. Here it's pretty
Yeah.
much the same. So that's
Yes.
what inspired me.
This is really wonderful to hear. Thank you for that. What does it take now? You've worked in obviously big companies, law firm for clients, and now you work for, as a generalist at your company. What does it take to be seen as a creative business partner?
Trust and education. So I will define it with those two words. Sometimes, especially from the marketing teams and creative teams, they don't trust your judgment, when you or your advice. So I think it's a learning curve for them, in the sense that, especially in Love Stuff Fancy, where they never had a legal partner to work with, guide them through specific process. So it has taken some time to build that trust and also educate them what we're trying to do. To be a creative as a business partner is like, I need to come up with ideas to make them understand that legal is there to help them, not to block or to
Mhm.
say no. So I try to be more approachable and trying to explain why we can do that, but in a very friendly, trusting relationship.
Yes.
So by that, you have to be creative most of the
Yes.
time.
Most of the time. And in terms also, I guess, of communication, trying to make it as simple to understand, right? But trust, of course, it starts with trust. And
I do
I,
think that,
yeah,
historically in all the legal
yeah,
department that I have worked, there is
yes,
this resistance to work with legal because,
yes,
first of all, I think it's a taboo. Like, oh my gosh, legal is going to say no, we're going to get sued, or, they have all these dark ideas. So it's always like a natural resistance to work with legal. So you
yes,
really have to take off your attorney lawyer hat and become more like a business partner that they can trust, and
yes,
basically
yes,
just go to you and say, can I do this? Can I not do this? And explain the why in a very simple language.
yes. Yvette, I know obviously you have a basis, you love art, and so you already are, you have this interest, you had this interest early on. Having said that, I wonder if working with innovation and creative teams, be it at, Victoria's Secret, J. Crew, or now, you know, in Love Shack Fancy, has it changed or impacted your leadership style and the way you work?
Yes, it has, particularly because there are different brands with different politics and different approach how they manage risk.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the bigger the brand, like brands like international, like Victoria's Secret, they tend to be more like not necessarily risk adverse, but they are willing to take more risk, especially when they are into an international arena, right? J. Crew went is a domestic brand with some
Mm-hmm.
international presence, but the way that they see the risk is also, very different. And Love Chuck Fancy is also a domestic brand, but it is growing so rapidly that the way that as a legal partner, you advise them on mitigating risk is different. So I think what I have learned is that working with different brands, it made me understand more how they get into the final product, right? How they
Mm-hmm.
get into what the products they create identify them as a brand, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think what I have changed is how taking all those into consideration is the way that I communicate with the business partner, how you phrase the legalities of something very complex, and I learned to give more practical guidance.
Yeah.
So learning from a law firm that is sometimes is
Mhm.
very rigid into
Mhm.
big multi-million dollars company to J. Crew and then LoveShackFancy, I think it help you to understand what the brand is looking for, what the business partners are looking for, and again, like using less legal language,
Mhm.
practical guidance,
Yes.
being more integrated into the process because that's what you want as a legal partner,
Yes.
being integrated into the process from the beginning to the end. So that's what it helped me.
It helped you do that. So, Yvette, now let's move on to global spotlight. And in this section, I would like to speak about, the international nature of our field. So, I love the fact that our community, this is how we met also, is highly international. How working globally has shaped your worldview today as Yvette living in the US versus the Yvette who was in Venezuela? And what tips do you have for collaborating effectively across cultures?
That's a tough question. I think working globally reinforce and make you realize that there is no one size fits it all. Like, you have to be able to adapt. Starting with there are different legal frameworks that I realize that a lot of people don't understand that, especially the business partner. When you say no, for example, China is first to file, or in the US, you can't get a trademark until you start using it. So I think that uh, along with cultural expectation, I think it um, you know, give you the perspective of other countries. When you come from one and you start working in another one, you learn not only the corporate side of it, but also the cultural aspect of it. Like, I think you have a broader understanding of the world and to a certain extent, and you are able to advise your business partners on that sense too. Like, you have to consider cultural expectation and manage that with also risk tolerance, right? So I think the approach and what I learned from it is like you have to be patient, you have to be flexible, and start asking questions early to understand what your global partner wants to do, wants to attain. So that's what I think it reinforced the experience, not only working globally, but coming from another country and working in another country, which culturally are very different. It's like night and day.
Yes, for sure. I can relate to that, having moved to the US a long time ago. Now we're going to move on to a challenging or a case that had a really big impact on you. So, can you share an IP or maybe legal challenge where you had to be exceptionally creative? And what was the maybe creative insight that made the difference?
So I think one of the biggest challenge that I had was protecting the brand in China when I was at Victoria's Secret.
Hmm.
I think China in itself is a very challenging jurisdiction that everyone in the IP world knows. But we were dealing at the time with a pirate that was very sophisticated, incredibly sophisticated. Or the company actually studied the brand very closely, designed products to get as close as possible to the actual product, the original product. But he was so smart that the way that they created the product was without triggering obvious aspect of the product to make enforcement easy. It was a very
Yes.
challenging case. And what it makes the different was again working very closely with the business, spending time understanding the brand, what exactly are the truly elements that you need to protect, and it's worth protecting because to me, enforcement at that point was not just legal, it's about being strategic and also
Hmm.
being creative. I remember spending many, many hours with our Chinese counsel trying to
Hmm.
develop a strategy and thinking ahead and thinking as the infringer to make sure that you were ahead of the
Hmm.
infringer and protect those elements that he or the company wasn't thinking about it. not only relying on trademark protection, not only relying in the design or logos that
Mm-hmm.
the company was at the time using, we have to again come up very strategic, very creative, and file for copyright applications and instead of trademark. Eventually, it was a very challenging work, but very rewarding because I learned many aspects of the enforcement part
Yeah,
in China. So that was one of the defining IP challenge in my
yeah.
career.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So now moving on to discussing more value, because
Mhm.
I would love to hear from from you. What do you think gives a brand value today, and how does IP shape that value?
So I think, and this is an opinion based on what I have seen and
Mm-hmm.
particularly lately with LoveShackFancy, I think
Yes.
a lot of the brand value today is driven how the product is positioned and amplified in social media. I think social media is playing a huge role. And so it comes down to like visibility of the mark, visibility of
Mm-hmm.
the business, visibility of the storytelling. So it's a key because of the way the brands are used in social media these days. IP is critical in protecting those core identifiers, trademark design, and also content. It comes down to no longer the look and feel of the mark, but also what they are doing and social media that copycat trying to copy for lack of a better word. So I think that's um, again working closely with your RP partner, with your business partner, is what it make the use of the brand in social media sustainable and possible by protecting, the core asset of the brand.
And so if you had one thing you wish more business leaders understood about the IP ecosystem, what would you want to tell them?
I want to tell them that the brand itself is the asset. And I think especially the trademark and the goodwill that goes behind it. I had been surprised by the fact that many leaders they don't know what a goodwill of a brand is. And sometimes there is a focus on short-term growth and quick wins on marketing. So I think because that they're not aware of exactly what a goodwill is, how what it takes to protect the brand, right? Which at the
Mhm.
end of the day is the asset of the company. There are certain business strategies that can dilute that brand and if they are not carefully considered, protecting brand integrity is just as important as driving revenue. And that's something
Yes.
that I would like the leadership to understand.
And it's interesting because I had this discussion with many colleagues where I think because you're right, brand building, goodwill building takes years.
Yes.
It could be destroyed in a minute. I mean, I exaggerate, but like a big reputational scandal and that's it. But yet the short term gains and going after those sometimes absolutely has a counter effect on this long term brand building, and sometimes it can have an negative impact on the brand. That's why I always had this discussion with marketers as well. It's like you are the you are the brand builders. We help you build brands, but you have to continue building the brand consistently in a way that will
Mhm.
continue growing the brand and making it stronger. And we had this discussion constantly. I wonder, do you feel that a bit differently now that you work for a company that is privately held and a family business? Is it a different
I think it's
kind
the
of
opposite.
perspective?
I think when it's a publicly held company, there's there's more freedom in a way, but they are being more conservative from a legal standpoint. I think
Yes,
because they are a small brand, family owned, sometimes there is that need to move quickly, and I want my brand to become well known
yes,
that they take bigger risk. Yeah,
yes.
so they
I
take bigger
see.
risk without knowing it.
Yes.
I think that's different.
That's what makes your, I guess, yes, and that's what makes your expertise in IP the more important. This in
Yeah.
this in this role, because you're right, the brand is key. So now, Yvette, what has been your toughest challenge as an in-house, professional, and what did it teach you versus when you were working maybe at the law firm?
So one of the toughest challenges, and I think anyone who works in house can relate to me, is how quickly the business move.
Yeah.
So I think, and not only how quickly they move, but they expect you to support everything. So I always joke and I said that I feel like I'm the doctor in a party, that comes to you with a question that you might not have an answer. But especially in these roles, I have to basically come up with immediate answers, even though I don't have complete information.
Yes.
And to me, that had been a real challenge because, from law firms, when required to conduct legal research very thoroughly to have a perfect answer, sometimes they don't care about the answer. They just want to know whether they can do it or not. So I think because of that, how quickly
Yes.
the business move, there is also this side that you can rely on outside counsel, right? And outside counsel help. But sometimes brand, particularly these days, they are trying to minimize manage cost. They're trying to limit it outside counsel expenses, which actually make your job even more tough. So you need to basically again prioritize, be comfortable with making decisions with that incomplete information, isn't enough to mitigate risk and offer this practical solution that the business is looking for. So that's what has been really the tough.
Now we're going to look at the future a bit before we just have one question left, but looking at the future, how do you see the world of brands and innovation evolving, and what do you see the next big challenge for your industry?
I think AI is actually impacting significantly on brands. From an IP perspective, I think from a copyright perspective, what I have seen is that one of the biggest challenge will be managing ownership, uses right, the risk around AI generated content. It
Yeah.
becomes extremely challenged to enforce, especially now with the dupe culture. So at the same time, AI, you can use it to your own advantage, right? To the brands to create and innovate. But
Yes.
these tools are making it easier for infringers to replace brand element at a quicker scale, which is making, in my experience, enforcement more and more complex. So I think another challenge is like education in a fast moving environment makes it really very challenging because sometimes the people don't have the time or but I think it's key. I think we have to push for education not only internally but externally so they understand how to use AI responsibly while protecting the brand.
So now, if we're closing this discussion with a summary of your career. If you had to sum up your career in one sentence, what would it be?
I think and instead of a whole sentence, I think I will resume my career in with two words. I think adaptability and flexibility. I have to, adapt from one country to another, be flexible not only on the professional arena but also with myself. Adaptability, as you probably know, has been challenged to work in corporate America with little English and you have to
Yeah.
really work hard
Hmm.
to to get to the level of your
Hmm.
American counterpart.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think patience, adaptability, and flexibility, that's what it will define my career.
Yes. I
Yep.
love that.
Thanks.
That's a great way to describe it. Yes. And relatable. Thank you very much, Yvette. It was really a pleasure. Thanks for taking the time. And, I'm definitely quite interesting in how you're going to tackle all the wonderful challenges of working for a very fast paced, growing brand like LoveShackFancy. So it's great. And I've discovered it. So great that I had a chance to also get to know it. So thank you very much, Yvette. I really
No,
appreciate
thank you
your
so
time.
much for the opportunity. It's always great to see you.